Was Psycho really just a black and white thriller about a quiet motel? Or was it a calculated psychological ambush that shattered filmmaking rules, terrified studio executives, and nearly collapsed under its own secrecy? This film wasn't just controversial, it was controlled, locked down, guarded like a classified file, scripts hidden, endings rewritten, audiences manipulated before they even sat down. Behind the camera, tempers flared, rules were broken, and one ending was quietly buried before it could ever be seen. These are 20 weird facts about Psycho Revelation that even longtime fans rarely hear discussed. Stay to the end, because the final truth changes how this film should be remembered. Let's begin. Psycho becomes a blueprint for fear. By the time Psycho reaches theaters, something irreversible happens to cinema. This film doesn't just scare people. It changes what audiences expect fear to be. Before this moment, suspense is clean, predictably, safe. After Psycho, safety disappears. What audiences didn't know is how closely filmmakers across Hollywood study its structure. Not the story, the strategy, the timing, the restraint, the confidence to let silence do the damage. Directors realize fear doesn't require spectacle. It requires control. Psycho proves that a film can feel dangerous without showing danger directly. It proves that confusion can be more unsettling than clarity. It proves that expectation itself is a weapon. Studios try to copy the shocks. They miss the discipline. They chase noise instead of tension. But the blueprint remains. Strip things down. Delay answers. Break trust carefully. Psycho doesn't invent fear. It professionalizes it. And that shift never reverses. Studios learn the wrong lesson. Hollywood reacts fast to Psycho. And mostly, it reacts poorly. Executives see crowds lining up. They hear the screams. They read the headlines. And they come to the wrong conclusion. They believe the secret ingredient is shock alone. Bigger twists, louder moments, faster reveals. What they miss is the preparation. Psycho works because it earns its moments. Every shock is positioned. Every silence is planned. Every cut is intentional. When studios rush to imitate the surface, they lose the foundation. What audiences didn't know is how many rushed projects follow, trying to copy the surprise without the patience. Fear becomes mechanical, predictable again. Hitchcock never intended to create a formula. He creates a discipline, one that demands restraint, trust, and confidence. The industry copies the scream, not the craft behind it. And that mistake echoes for decades. The film changes how trailers work. Before Psycho, trailers explain movies. They summarize. They reassure. They show the audience exactly what they're getting. Hitchcock destroys that approach. Instead of revealing scenes, he withholds them. Instead of clarity, he offers curiosity. Instead of comfort, he builds tension. He even appears personally, guiding viewers through the space while refusing to explain what happens inside it. What audiences didn't know is how radical this approach is. Studios worry viewers won't understand. Hitchcock understands something else. Mystery creates demand. This is not promotion, it's conditioning. The trailer doesn't sell a story. It sells an experience. A promise that something will happen, but only if you sit still and watch from the beginning. Modern teaser culture begins here. The idea that less information creates more urgency. That silence can be louder than spectacle. After Psycho, trailers stop explaining. They start provoking. Audiences scream, and Hitchcock listens. Early screenings of Psycho are chaotic. Viewers react physically. Some laugh nervously. Others freeze. Silence follows moments that should feel resolved. Hitchcock doesn't panic. Hey studies. What audiences didn't know is how carefully he observes these reactions. He times breaths. He watches posture. He listens to the room, not the dialogue. Then he adjusts. Frames are trimmed. Cuts are tightened. Pauses are shortened or extended by fractions of seconds. These changes are invisible but powerful. Fear is not accidental. It's calibrated. Hitchcock treats the audience like an instrument. Every reaction informs the next adjustment. If tension breaks too early, he repairs it. If confusion fades too quickly, he restores it. The final version of Psycho is not just filmed. It's tuned. That's why the reactions feel universal. The movie isn't guessing how people will respond. It already knows. The title card is intentionally harsh. The opening credits of Psycho are aggressive. Lines slash across the screen. Text fractures. Names break apart. This is not decorative design. What audiences didn't know is that Hitchcock uses the title sequence as a psychological warning. Before a character speaks, before a location appears, the film announces instability. Nothing holds together. The fractured graphics mirror the story's structure. Identities split. Expectations collapse. Order disintegrates. Even the rhythm of the music matches this violence. Sharp, repetitive, unforgiving. This opening isn't meant to be admired. It's meant to unsettle. To tell the audience something is already wrong, even if they can't explain why. The movie doesn't begin with a scene. It begins with a disruption. By the time the story starts, the audience is already off balance, and they never fully recover. Censorship battles reshape scenes. Psycho pushes boundaries that make regulators nervous, too intense, too suggestive, too uncomfortable. The response is resistance. What audiences didn't know is how many scenes are negotiated rather than approved. Hitchcock doesn't fight directly. He adapts, he reframes, he finds angles that imply instead of show. Cuts are requested. He offers alternatives. Sound replaces image. Editing replaces exposure. These restrictions don't weaken the film. They sharpen it. Limitation forces creativity. Fear becomes psychological instead of literal. Suggestion becomes more powerful than depiction. The final version of Psycho is not what Hitchcock originally imagines. It's what survives pressure, and that survival shapes its legacy. Anthony Perkins is cast against expectation. Anthony Perkins doesn't look dangerous. That's the point. At the time, audiences expect threats to look obvious. Loud, aggressive, clear. Perkins offers none of that. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this casting is. Hitchcock wants contradiction, politeness, masking instability, calm hiding fracture. Perkins plays restraint, not menace. His movements are careful, his voice controlled, his presence unassuming. This disarms viewers. They trust him before they question him. The performance isn't about surprise. It's about recontextualization. Once the truth emerges, every earlier moment changes meaning. The smile, the hesitation, the quiet pauses. Fear doesn't erupt. It retroactively settles in. That's far more unsettling than any immediate threat. The motel is meant to feel ordinary. Nothing about the Bates Motel feels cinematic, and that's deliberate. It's not grand, not stylish, not dramatic. It feels temporary, forgettable. What audiences didn't know is how carefully this normalcy is designed. Hitchcock wants familiarity. He wants viewers to feel like they've passed places like this before. Ordinary space, lower defense. The danger isn't announced. It blends in. By choosing plainness, Hitchcock removes warning signs. Fear arrives where it shouldn't. The motel doesn't trap people. It invites them, and that makes it far more unsettling. The film is shot cheaply on purpose. Psycho looks modest, and that's intentional. Hitchcock uses a smaller crew, faster schedules, techniques borrowed from television, not because he has to, but because he wants to. What audiences didn't know is how this approach adds realism. Less polish means more immediacy, more tension, more intimacy. The camera feels closer, the spaces feel tighter, the atmosphere feels raw. Luxury would have softened the edges. Instead, the film feels exposed, vulnerable, unprotected. Fear thrives there. An alternate ending is briefly considered. During development, Hitchcock considers extending the ending, not with action but with aftermath. A longer silence, a lingering image, a moment that holds instead of resolves. It's discussed, tested, removed. Why? Because it explains too much. What audiences didn't know is how carefully Hitchcock guards ambiguity. He believes fear should outlast understanding. The moment clarity settles in, danger fades. So he ends earlier, sharper, colder. The audience leaves unsettled, not informed. That decision defines the film's power. Hitchcock controls silence after release. Hitchcock doesn't stop directing when the film ends. In many ways, that's when his control becomes most precise. After Psycho premieres, he actively shapes how people talk about it. Critics are encouraged to avoid specifics. Public discussion is nudged toward restraint. Mystery is protected like a fragile mechanism. This isn't arrogance, it's preservation. Hitchcock understands something rare. Fear weakens when it's over-explained. The more people describe what happens, the less power it has over the next viewer. So he limits the conversation, not through force, but through culture. Theater owners post notices. Viewers are asked to experience the film, not summarize it. What audiences didn't know is that silence becomes part of the design. The movie doesn't end at the final frame. It continues in the quiet afterward, in the walk to the parking lot, in the thoughts that can't quite settle. And if you're enjoying this deep dive, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the final stretch reveals just how deeply Psycho reshapes audience behavior itself. Here, silence isn't absence. It's strategy. The ending explanation is forced by the studio. Studios fear confusion more than fear itself, and Psycho leaves people deeply unsettled. Executives worry audiences won't understand what they've seen. They imagine complaints, frustration, anger. So they push for clarity. An explanation is added. Hitchcock doesn't fight the inclusion outright. Instead, he controls how it feels. The tone is stripped of warmth. The delivery is clinical, detached, almost uncomfortable to sit through. There is no relief in the explanation, no emotional release. What audiences didn't know is that this is deliberate. Hitchcock allows clarity, but he denies comfort. The explanation answers questions, but it doesn't undo what's already happened. Fear has already settled too deeply. The studio gets structure. The audience keeps the unease. Understanding doesn't erase dread. It only names it. And once named, it still lingers. The explanation closes the story, but it doesn't close the feeling. That feeling follows the audience home. That balance is no accident. It's Hitchcock meeting compromise with control. The monster is never revealed as expected. There is no traditional reveal in Psycho, no dramatic entrance, no moment where danger steps fully into the light and announces itself. Instead, threat arrives in pieces, glimpses, fragments that never quite form a complete picture until it's too late. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this restraint is. Hitchcock refuses to give viewers the comfort of early clarity. He delays certainty because certainty creates safety, and safety destroys fear. Rather than showing a single, obvious source of danger, the film lets unease drift. It shifts, it hides, it changes shape. The audience senses something is wrong long before they can explain why. Clarity eventually arrives, but not soon enough to protect anyone. By the time answers appear, fear has already done its work. Hitchcock understands that fear doesn't thrive in what's known. It thrives in what's incomplete. The monster isn't a figure. It's uncertainty itself. And once that uncertainty takes hold, it refuses to leave. The music almost doesn't exist. Silence dominates Psycho. Long stretches pass with no score at all. No emotional guidance, no reassurance, just space and tension filling it. When music finally appears, it doesn't comfort, it strikes. What audiences didn't know is how close the film comes to being almost completely silent. The score is used sparingly, strategically, and with force. It doesn't flow beneath the scenes. It interrupts them. It cuts through them. Sound becomes an event. Hitchcock understands that constant music dulls emotion. Silence sharpens it. In silence, every footstep matters. Every breath carries weight. The audience listens harder because they have to. And when the music finally erupts, it feels violent, sudden, inescapable. It doesn't accompany fear. It creates it. This isn't background sound. It's psychological pressure. The absence makes the presence devastating. And once the sound fades again, the silence feels heavier than before. The shower scene is built from fragments. The most famous sequence in Psycho is never shown the way people remember it. The memory feels complete. The reality isn't. The scene is built from fragments, dozens of short shots, rapid cuts, sharp sounds, glimpses that never fully connect. The camera never lingers. It never settles. What audiences didn't know is that nothing explicit is shown. The mind does the work. The imagination fills the gaps. And imagination is always more powerful than certainty. Hitchcock designs the scene like a puzzle missing pieces. The audience supplies what isn't there. That's why the moment feels so vivid. The fear is personal, customized by each viewer's thoughts. This isn't accident. It's control at its highest level. The scene overwhelms not by showing too much, but by showing just enough. It proves that fear isn't about images. It's about what the audience is forced to imagine when images disappear. That's not shock. That's mastery. The lead actress is removed halfway deliberately. The audience believes they understand the story. They believe they know who this film belongs to. They settle into expectation. And then that expectation vanishes. This removal is not a twist of convenience. It's calculated. Hitchcock knows audiences attach themselves to familiar faces. He uses that trust, then breaks it. What audiences didn't know is how radical this choice is at the time. Removing a major star halfway through a film feels like betrayal, and that's exactly the point. Stability collapses. The narrative floor drops out. Suddenly, no one feels safe. If this can happen, anything can. Fear rushes in to fill the void. From this moment on, the audience stops predicting. They stop relaxing. They stop trusting the rules they brought into the theater. The story doesn't just change direction. It erases direction entirely. And in that uncertainty, fear takes full control. Hitchcock forbids late entry into theaters. Timing is sacred in Psycho. Hitchcock treats it as part of the storytelling itself. Miss the beginning, and the trap doesn't work. So he forbids late entry. This decision shocks theater owners and audiences alike. At the time, people wander in whenever they please. Hitchcock refuses to allow it. Ushers enforce the rule. Signs are posted. The experience becomes strict. What audiences didn't know is why this matters so much. The opening isn't exposition, it's conditioning. It lowers defenses. It builds false comfort. If viewers miss that calm, the later fear loses power. By controlling entry, Hitchcock controls mindset. The audience arrives together, watches together, falls into the trap together. The experience becomes a ritual. Fear doesn't begin on screen. It begins the moment the doors close. The famous house is built to unsettle the crew. The house isn't just scenery. It's psychological pressure made physical. Hitchcock places it high above the motel on purpose. Watching, silent, removed. It doesn't belong, and that's the point. Crew members feel uneasy around it. The angles seem wrong. The windows feel like eyes. The staircase feels steeper than expected. Nothing is overtly threatening, yet discomfort lingers. What audiences didn't know is that Hitchcock wants this reaction. He believes atmosphere starts before performance. If the actors feel unsettled, it transfers to the screen. The house doesn't move. It doesn't chase. It doesn't explain itself. It waits. And that waiting creates tension more effectively than any action. The house feels aware, present, patient. It doesn't announce danger. It observes. And being watched is often more frightening than being chased. Hitchcock buys the book quietly to hide the story. Before filming begins, Hitchcock recognizes a threat not to the story, but to its secrecy. The novel Psycho is gaining attention, too much attention. So he buys copies, quietly, methodically. What audiences didn't know is how deliberate this move is. Hitchcock understands that knowledge weakens fear. If viewers know what happens, the illusion collapses. By limiting access to the story, he protects the experience. The fewer people who know the ending, the stronger the impact becomes. This isn't promotion, it's containment. Silence protects the surprise. Mystery preserves tension. Secrecy becomes strategy. The story remains dangerous because it remains unknown. In an era before spoiler culture is discussed openly, Hitchcock treats information as something to be controlled. Because once the secret escapes, fear escapes with it. The opening isn't calm, it's a calculated trap. Everything begins softly. That's the danger. The opening feels familiar, almost ordinary. A city, a room, casual conversation. No warning signs, no urgency. What audiences didn't know is that this calm is engineered. Hitchcock designs the opening to lower defenses, to make viewers feel safe, to convince them they understand the kind of movie they're watching. Comfort invites trust. Trust invites vulnerability. And when fear finally arrives, it devastates because no one is ready for it. Psycho doesn't rush. It doesn't announce itself. It waits patiently for the audience to settle in. Only then does it strike. The opening isn't about story, it's about manipulation. By the time viewers realize they've misjudged the film, it's too late to retreat. The trap has already closed. Psycho wasn't just a movie, it was an experiment in control. It didn't ask permission, it rewired expectation. And more than 60 years later, it still feels dangerous. If you enjoyed this deep dive, like, subscribe, and remember, fear isn't what you see, it's what you're not ready for.